Hey there viewers, thank you for tuning into Supermariodiagnostics. Once again, today we are working on a 2011 BMW X6 with a big 4.4 liter engine in it, otherwise known as the N63. And the customer's concern, which is another shop, is that the car is misfiring. And they told us that it had cylinders 1 and 5 misfiring, and that they put a plug-in coil on there and it didn't fix it. So this was different because there's 2 cylinders. They're claiming that 2 cylinders are misfiring, and of course they've been in here reading codes, clearing codes, and all that. So I did a pre-scan, and it did have misfire codes, but it also had other codes as well. It did have it for 1 and 5, and we're gonna take a look at live data real quick, just to see if we can take a look at the smoothness values. You know what I mean? So let's go into that. We're in live data right now, and I can feel the misfire, but you know, there's always going to be someone saying otherwise. So we're going to go to cylinder. We'll search cylinder, and I'm going to put this thing into drive, and it is bright. Let's see if I can bring this down a bit. There you go. It is a little off. Looking at our misfire counter, we got huge amounts of misfires on number 1. And even though I could feel it right now, it's not counting them. Let me rev it up a little. There it goes. It starts raising little by little. And you can also see about 1,000 misfires on number 5. So first thing I want to do is take a look at that firing order and see if usually number 1 is the first in the firing order, right? So I want to see if number 5 is next, and if it is just a consequence of the crank rotation, the speed, the acceleration and deceleration of the crank, if number 1's misfire is affecting number 5, right? But that's one thing I want to do, is take a look at service information to find out the firing order. But not only that, I would like to do a cranking amperage test. There's been way too many times that I would get into a misfire diagnosis, and I would just start scoping the coils, the secondary, start looking into the other possibilities without first ruling out the most expensive and one of the most easiest things to look at, which is mechanical. So I made it a thing to I try to stay by this. You know, sometimes I slip and I go the other direction, but I try to stand by this, and I made it a thing to always check cranking amperage first and then move on. And if cranking amperage is low, my next step would be to rule out cylinder wash. I don't know if these have cylinder deactivation. I think they do. This is an older year than ones that I've showed in the past. Anywho, we're gonna start with the cranking amperage test, and I've been dealing with these cars a little bit now, and I found that the easiest way to disable starting and to get the car only to crank, the easiest way for me is to take apart the plastics that are on top of the DME and go to the DME, and there's a connector just for coils. So let's go ahead and do that. And I do apologize for the noise in the background, but that's the best I could do. Got the mic up to my face, and my brother's working on some other stuff, so hope you guys don't mind. And I hope you can hear me clearly. This is what I was talking about. Once I did that video, if you guys seen the video in the past where I was diagnosing a ignition coil driver issue, I found out that these are all responsible for coil command. So we're just gonna disconnect this one connector here, and that will let us crank this vehicle for not too long of a period of time. But we're gonna crank the vehicle and see if our compression is all even. We've got our amp clamp, right? I'm gonna turn it on, zero it out, and put it onto our starter wire. I hope it's in the right orientation, but I gotta set up my Pico first. So we will need to select amp clamp at 2000 amp mode. and it is noisy. And instead of adding filter, before capturing slows down the scope, so you could just bring down the number of samples. So that cleans it up a whole lot. Let me zero it one more time, make sure my connections are all good. I saw my zeroing. Let's go ahead and crank this thing. And I'm waiting for the scope to start all over. Oh, that does not sound good. I don't think you guys will be able to hear it, but the waveform will not lie. Let's go ahead and pause that. Now, do we know if it's number one? Not yet. We only know that all of our compression strokes are not even. Let's clean this up after the capture, and we can see that there is a low contributing cylinder. Now, at this point, we only have a certain amount of time pre-approved in order to get a feel for what we're getting into, right? So this shop proved us some specific amount of time to just get a feel as to where we're headed and let them know if further testing time is required. And at this point, we could take a look at the crankcase. I'm not sure that I would be able to isolate the intake system from the crankcase, because this is a pretty intricate setup right here. I mean, we've got our breathers here, but we have quite a setup here. I could hook up a whoa, that's not good. That's not good at all. I think I want to go with a different test at this point. Good thing we looked at that. That also could not necessarily be something that bad. I know it looks pretty bad. It looks like a milkshake, but if it's very little trace amounts, I'm not sure that I would worry about it that much. I've seen this a lot on these vehicles, but we're gonna have to let it cool down and go for a coolant pressure test. There wasn't any complaints of overheating. At this point, I think I'm gonna do two tests. We're gonna check the crankcase pressure along with the coolant system pressure, along with the RC, all in one shot. See where if compression is going into any of those systems before going forward, and see what the customer decides to do after that. All right, so we are just about set up. We've got one of those cheapo depot Harbor Freight oil filler, funnel kits with a intake bladder, so it's called, installed onto that, and we are just going to check our waveform, make sure we have a good response, and hook up our pulse sensor. This is Cody's pulse sensor. We're going to hook that up to this, make sure you have it suspended in order to mitigate any vibration skewing your reading, because if you just tap this thing, it just goes everywhere, as you can see. I don't have it connected to the cooling system. I really think this is just simple condensation. This happens, it's very common. You'll see it in a lot of cars. I don't think we have a head gasket issue, and we definitely don't have an overheating issue. So I'm holding off on this one. Besides, it's too hot to open at this time. So at this moment, I really just want to make sure we have no cylinder wash, and that obviously could be a result. They already changed the plug in the coil, so if it was a weak spark, that could happen. But if it was an overly generous injector or a leaking injector, that would probably cause cylinder wash as well. We could also take a look at fuel pressure to see if it drops once we stop cranking this thing, but I'll probably do that after this. For now, we are simply trying to rule out cylinder wash. If we get nothing here, if we get no upward pulse while the compression falls off on that cylinder, then we are moving on to a different route. We're going to have to update the customer and await approval. So for now, let's go ahead and do this. Okay, I think that's enough. All right, so we've got our waveform here. Let's go ahead and zoom into this thing and see whether this happens during the low compression event. What aids us in doing this and analyzing these waveforms is using rulers. This is an 8-cylinder engine. We could turn this into an 8 partition ruler and set up our rulers like that. You know what, let's do it like this. We are right there. You can zoom in. And we do have like pulses, but it is not happening during the compression of our low cylinder. It's happening before and after. Of course, this could also this looks a lot like a crank speed issue. You know, when the crank speeds up during the low compression event, it pulls as a larger pull. I don't think that this is a cylinder wash situation. We would definitely see some kind of a rise in the red waveform, which is the crankcase, as the low compression event is happening in our cranking amperage blue waveform. So we're gonna have to keep testing. At this point, we are at our stopping point. This is gonna either be I don't think it's rings, so we're gonna have to come up with summarize our plan of attack to our customer and see if we get an approval. Taking a look at our firing order, we could see that number 5 is right after number 1, and it's very likely that number 1 is the culprit, and also causing our misfire count to go up on number 5 as well, since number 5 is following in the firing order. I've seen this before where that would happen, but I wouldn't also close the door on the possibility of an issue with number 5 itself. But more than likely, this is a result of number 1 misfiring, running poorly, and since number 5 follows, the crank speed is clocked by the DME as, not going fast enough and counted as a misfire. We got a 2012 BMW 650i, the 4.4 liter. Yeah, what are you doing to it? I got this upper oil pan gasket that I'm replacing, and right now I'm chasing the threads. Why would you chase the threads? You can't just slap it back on and call it a day? No, there's a TSB on this one that requires you to remove the excess material inside these threads. Or what? You could crack something, or? Yeah, the oil pan could get cracked. That, and if you don't follow the tightening sequence to the T, you're definitely gonna have problems. Looks like people are gonna have to start doing their homework before taking on a job, even quoting a job, right? Yeah, these engines aren't as simple as they used to be now. They got all kinds of procedures, man. You gonna start it up for the first time? No, I'm doing the priming procedure for the oil circuit. It's 10 seconds on, 20 seconds rest, 3 times. Oh, okay. All right, cool. So we got the approval to dig further, and looking at the way this thing is set up, I'm wondering whether I should do the intake pulses and all that stuff. Like, this is a dual intake. It's not going to be just a simple, put the intake bladder in and do an intake pulse and done, like I'm used to. And I've had pretty good success with sticking a borescope into the cylinder with all the valves, when they should be closed, and taking a look at those valves to see if one's hanging open, or if it's a valve seating issue. If you guys have seen my Saturn video and my Mini Cooper misfire video, both of those I used the borescope and had a lot of success with that. I think that might be the easiest thing for us to do, is, even though the crank is not easy to get to, right now I think that might be the best way to go at it at this point. They may all look sealed, and in that case, we would just probably do a leak down from there. But um, I love to scope stuff. You guys know that. But at this point, I think that might be the easiest thing. You know, if I start messing around with the whole dual intake thing, it might end up taking way more time than it should, and that's not what I want either. So we're gonna go ahead and take off the spark plug and put this thing into where all the valves are supposed to be closed, either some part of the compression stroke, and see what we find in there. So I'm all set up for a leak down test. I wanted to be sure about this thing, remove all doubt whatsoever. Last thing we want to do is replace or have to take out this engine for nothing, right? So we want to make sure where it's going. I have it all set up already. I'm putting it at 100 psi, and I hear something. Don't know if you guys can see this. Let me take you guys with me. Nothing's happening there. I've got my intake removed. Feel nothing in there. They have the wrong coolant in there. No bubbles. Let's go to the exhaust. Nothing there. So what is it? I think I'm gonna take a page from our good friend Hans Jorgensen. We're just gonna put some smoke in this thing. I've got that all-tool smoke tester, and that thing pumps out about 15 psi. So if we can't find it with the smoke, putting it through this, we're not gonna find it. So those of you who don't know who Hans Jorgensen is, he's part of the Train by Tech's team. Great group of guys, always putting out training. They're the ones that took me out to my first big training event, and I'll never forget that. But he's very outside of the box kind of guy, so I got a lot of respect for him, and we're gonna see if it helps us with this. I hear something. I don't know whether I don't think it's my tool itself, but I hear something here. We're just gonna smoke test the cylinder and see where it's going. So I haven't put anything back together yet. I still have my intake off, my coolant bottle cap off, everything off. I'm just gonna run it right through the leak down. Don't really care at this point. I'm gonna go check my exhaust. Obviously we have to make sure our smoke is good. Don't know if you guys can see this. Smoke is good. I see some smoke. See if you guys can see this. That was fast. See if we can get some lighting in there. Where's it coming from? It's not my tools. Nice. You guys already know what it is, right? Any guesses yet? Any guesses? That is the injector seal. That injector seal is no good. Teflon seal. Hopefully the bore is still good, but looks like we got ourselves a leaking GDI injector seal. That's awesome. Engine won't have to come out. Valve cover doesn't have to come off. I did take a bore scope in there, and I was having doubts about my findings, so I decided let's do a leak down. Had to take the fan out to get to the crank bolt. Not a big deal, but that's awesome. I'm glad the customer went all the way with the diag. Imagine they wouldn't have let us continue to pinpoint the issue. This would have been, who knows where they would have ended up. Hopefully they would have ended up with somebody finding out the culprit. But wow, smoke test for the win, fellas. Hope you guys are with me so far. where I believe they'll do it. I really think they'll fix it all the way through to the end. I don't think number 5 has the same issue, but this makes me want to smoke test number 5 as well. I think I'm going to, even though the RC test clearly shows a higher compression at number 5. But I won't do that on camera. I'm just gonna do it on my own and give the customer the complete estimate, and they'll go ahead and find out. We'll go ahead and find out if they're gonna do the job or not, but more than likely they will. Thanks to Hans for this great tip he posted a while back in across several forums, several platforms. Don't think he's watching, but if you know him, tell him I said thanks. So the customer, which is another shop, has decided to fix it on their own. We are not going to see this through to the end, unfortunately. We won't be able to see the confirmed repair, but I believe the information will be useful anyway. I hope you all enjoyed this one. I hope this was useful. If you didn't find it useful, go ahead and subscribe anyway. And if you liked what you saw, consider subscribing if you haven't already. Leave a comment. What did I leave out? What did I miss? I know I missed something. Be sure to leave it in the comment section. And till next time, thanks for watching.